and you see yourself as love. That's all your energy is. So you have no choice but to give that out into the world because you're just doing it automatically. When you don't see yourself as that, you're not giving that freely, even though it's not a thing that you ever have to consciously give when you realize that that's not how it works. But you can send off the message of withholding that. And I see that's again, when you really look at that, that's just fear. You're afraid that if you give it, you're not going to get it back. And then it's like, that's not how love works. It's not this thing that's limited. It's limitless. When you realize that, then you get to a point where you're not criticizing yourself. You're not criticizing the outside world because you just arrive in this love space all the time. And you just see everything that feels uncomfortable, not as wrong, not as other, not as outside of you. You see it more with compassion and love. So that's how you get to a place of not judging, because the only reason you're doing that is because you feel like you lack, and you don't. Hey, Flow Getter friends, it's us again, Erica and Lisa. We don't really know what we're going to talk about, so we're just going to start talking about our thoughts, and then it'll lead into something cool.
Something brilliant. This way
something
comes. Brilliant. Yay. Well, Erica, it's so great to see you. I wanted to share a learning that might lead us into the topic of the day, but it could also take us off into somewhere else. Okay. So the other day, all right, you know how I try to be a person who's heart-centered and kind and all these things, but let's just say I can get judgy, okay? But I realized this huge epiphany of judginess. Now, I think a lot of times we get judgy because we're feeling insecure and all these things, but this wasn't that. This was something totally different. So I was like, okay, that's different, because usually if I'm judgy in the past, it was like I felt insecure or you see that out there kind of thing. There's a lot of people that do that. Okay, so I'm going to have a story. Let's start with a story. This woman was not allowing her teenage daughter to go on a spring break trip that she'd planned, and money, and everybody's, going with parents and stuff like that. She wasn't going to let her go because she was 15 minutes late from her curfew. But she was late because someone had brought her a burrito. The mother of the boy she was dating, brought her a burrito, and she felt rude going, okay, I got to go and take this burrito. So she sat and was polite, ate it. So she was 15 minutes late. Mom said, you're not going on this thing. And I was like, oh, she's bad woman. Oh, all this stuff. Cause I was like, that's so harsh. And she's flexing her power. And I was just, judgments were flying out of my mouth. I was horrified, right? I'm like, oh, come on, lady. All these things. And this is just a story someone's telling me. I have no stake in this game. I don't know these people. I was just like, oh my God. And then I felt horrible. I felt like, God, I'm so judgmental. What is my deal? I did not feel good. I didn't do do things that make you feel good type of thing. And I thought, what is your deal? What's going on here? And so I really thought about it, because I'm like, well, I don't want to do that again. And it feels icky. And this would be a good learning opportunity. So I sat there for a minute and I went, oh my God, you identified so much as if you're too empathetic. You're putting yourself in this position instead of just looking at it from the outside. You're in there, in this family, living these lives and going, this is not fair. And so I reacted to it because I was way too, I don't know if the word empathetic or involved or attached, somehow I just plugged into it so deep that I had this reaction instead of wow, that's really unfortunate. Both people must be suffering, including the person who was flexing their power and all, I did not take a compassionate overview. I was in there living it. And I was like, don't do that. Right? So I learned that my really sensitive, empathetic nature that helps me understand people is also a total weakness or something. I don't know. So I wanted to hear all your thoughts about that, because that was just craziness to me, that I let myself get that out of alignment by caring about somebody. I was like, this just doesn't make sense, because it's like I care, but then I'm also being hyper negative and judgmental, and I'm sure everyone on earth has done this before. So, but I wanted, because it wasn't insecurity, or it was just like this pure, like I was being these people instead of observing these people. So I want to hear what your thoughts are.
The level of awareness that you have is incredible, because it's like, you know how sensitive you are, you know how empathetic you are. You caught yourself really quickly. You're also human, because as you were telling the story, I had the same reaction. I was like, oh, the crime doesn't fit the punishment. Why is she doing this? She must have done, I'm like in my head, also judging. So,
yeah, I lost my shit completely.
But I also know you, and along with being sensitive and empathetic, and I know it's very related, you're also immediately understand what the solution is right away. So for you, it's like, oh, if you, as an objective person, if you were hearing the story, what should mom do? You would know the answer. You would know a answer, right? You would know a probably more solution that would probably have caused less suffering for both, perhaps. I love this subject, by the way, because it hits so close to home, like this whole idea of judgment and judging. It's like, who doesn't do it? And it is maybe one of my biggest flaws. Yes, absolutely one of my biggest flaws. So there we have it.
Well, but I don't think it's a flaw. I mean, sometimes people shouldn't be wearing those pants, right? I mean, like come on. Like I want to help you with those pants. I mean, I'm teasing, but really, like, I know there's a discernment, or I prefer that or don't prefer that.
Well, so there's a fine line. That's a fine. And we need to talk about that. There's a fine line between judging and then having something resonating with you. Something resonating with you, and you decide to make a different choice based on what resonates with you. That's not a judgment to me. That's more like, that just doesn't fit what I want in this moment, and that's cool. But you're not saying that's horrible. That's right. The judgment, right? I think this is probably a thing that we all do. We see another way, and when we see somebody making a choice that feels out of alignment with who we are, that's where we're like, oh my God, that, then we decide that's painful, and we decide that's, what an awesome
truths. Yeah. 8 billion truths. 8 billion truths.
Exactly. Like perhaps, exactly. Like maybe for their situation, we don't know, what their relationship is like. We don't know if perhaps the daughter, this was sort of like the straw that broke the camel's back for the mom. Perhaps the daughter had a series of things. I understand, I'm a parent.
Yeah, technically not, but
you know more.
There's more backstory to, I would say, I know enough to know that that's probably not a great choice. I mean, I was a stepmom, so many bad choices. It's just, moms are trying to make the world go round, and you make dumb choices a lot, right? It's really hard. The headline for me was, don't do things that make you feel bad, even though you're right.
Okay.
Like, I probably wasn't wrong. Like, because the person who told me this also reacted negatively to it. Like, oh, this is a really uncool thing or whatever. So, but I think the headline is, you can still be right, but I felt awful. I just felt awful. Being so, like, just this
invested
negativity and invested. Yeah, I didn't like that. It's like I stepped out of myself into this other world instead of staying in myself. So that's like a boundaries issue. If you're tired all the time, that's probably like your energy's leaving you, going somewhere else, So it was really like this lesson in like 10 things. Like, okay, what does compassion look like? What does judgment look like? What does energy drain look like? What does having to be right, and like, just because you're right doesn't mean you have to, and then I had all these feelings, and I don't really think I had any similar experiences as a child. Like, my parents pretty much were like, if I was in trouble, I deserved it. And, like, it was pretty fair. So, I was totally perfect. I never got in trouble, but just kidding. But it's like, it didn't really trigger I didn't have a similar situation. So, it just was like this I guess what it is every moment is a cornucopia of lessons and I would say upgrades that you could make to your body mind thing and the body mind complex. Oh, here's another thing. When you're angry, it makes you feel a little more alive. So if you're kind of not very excited about your life, judgment and anger kind of, yeah, I've got thoughts and feelings and I'm passionate and, and so it just kind of alluded me to like how off balance we can get with one, because it was just like this in passing kind of story. And I realized that my particular focus that I'm having right now is conserving energy and wanting to like not only conserving energy, but staying inside myself, adjusting my own vibration, raising my consciousness so that I can manifest better, which totally goes hand in hand. And I realized that I'm like, well, you just like basically knocked yourself off wherever you were. So why did you do that? What was going on? So I think it's good for me to like have a analysis of that so I can kind of go, okay, here's why I did it. Maybe it's 10 reasons, but then like basically solve it essentially. Yes. And so nobody expects, especially in Flow Getter, we are not perfect and we do not expect perfection. What is perfect is realizing what you're experiencing and trying to do better and flow more with life than jamming a rock in your river and getting all mad about it. It's like, I just threw a rock in my river and was like, look at this rock. Oh my God. Instead of, all right, just let that experience come to you and have your feelings about it if you want, or don't. Like, just realize that those are people having an experience, but it's not your experience. But I took it as if, like there's so many layers. I mean, I could just go on and on, but you probably have thoughts you want to share.
No, it's fascinating because I identify so much with what you're saying. And then the flip side is, because we kind of talked about this in the last podcast a little bit, like whether to engage or run. Like what, when you're empathizing with something or you're having feelings about something and it's kind of making you tense and you don't want to feel that way anymore. Do you run or do you engage? Like what do you do? And I think this topic is a little challenging for me because I don't know. I haven't reached that. Do you know what I mean?
You have not come to level 7. Yes.
Right. But it's worth talking about. I know I've said this in a couple of podcasts where judging myself and judging the outside world has always come a little too easily. You know what I mean? Until like the more aware I become, the less it happens. But it's not like this straight trajectory. It's this thing that does this.
It's the stock market.
Like, it's a stock market where sometimes we're really good at it and then we fall off and we're like, oh, it's, but like we're headed in the same direction. It's just like how unconscious do we let ourselves get, each moment, each day. But when we're conscious, that's when there's no room. Okay. Consciousness and presence, I think. Well, consciousness and being present, those two things, because when you're present, you're conscious. I kind of think. I'm just going to say that.
Yeah. We'll just say
mostly.
It's true.
We'll just say it's true. Then you're not, I think judgment doesn't really fit into those things so much. When you're really there, when you're really present, when you're really aware, and then you're listening to a story or you're seeing you're experiencing something or you're seeing something happen, when you're really there, I believe you probably can truly empathize without judging, because we don't want to get rid of the empathy part, do we? We don't want to get rid of the levels of sensitivity because I think those are magical.
They're super magical. Yeah. Well, I think it's like, the question is, why did I jump out of my own experience instead of going right to the compassion piece? It was like, I just threw myself into it. And I've seen people do this my whole life, where they get so upset over hearing about something else because they've literally jumped out of their own bodies and put themselves in the body of the other person. That's not empathy. That's leaving yourself.
Well, that's what I'm saying. That's the lack of
Yeah.
awareness part.
Right. Yeah. Whereas I think if you have empathy, it's like, I didn't have empathy for the mom. I was like, oh, even though I know her history, I should have empathy. No. I was like, no, bad person, bad, and then I was like, oh, and so, yeah, it was, man, it's like, it's something I'll be thinking about for a while. And I'm really interested to see what our audience has to say about this stuff too, because, there's like this level of the brain has to discern right and wrong and what it prefers and yes, no, and up, down. Like that's a very natural thing. But when it messes with your own vibration is when you need to stop, right? And take a minute to like, okay, you're preferring, like I watch a lot of Project Runway. Okay. Love it. And I love watching the outfit come down there. I'm like, no, that's too this. I'm like, well, I love that. Like, I like discerning what I like, but I'm not going, that's a horrible person who made the choice or something. Like, it's not about them or anything like that. And it doesn't bring me down. I just know what I like. So if it's like that level of discernment of like, oh, I really prefer being around people who aren't, behaving that way. That's a more centered thing. But when I'm like literally incandescent with fury about hearing about something, I'm like, okay, what's going on?
So I'm wondering actually, when we're talking about feelings and emotions, I think sometimes certain feelings and emotions, because we experience them or we have experienced them enough where it feels like there's a certain comfort zone. And sometimes we jump into a feeling because we're comfortable there in a way. And it's not about the story or the experience that we're hearing. It's just an excuse for us to have a feeling.
Ooh.
So perhaps, and I'm not saying this was the case, but I know I've done this where I'll hear something and like, I just need an excuse to feel a certain way, whether it's anger or joy or fury or sadness,
Fury
whatever
is one of my favorites. Yeah.
But like, if there's something that comes into my experience that allows me to go there very easily, that's a lot. It's like, that's my excuse. And then I don't have to take ownership of it. I can blame it on something else or someone else. And I can feel a certain way. I think that's a lot. I do it. I've done it. I've seen other people do it, like I think that's, again, going back to this idea of awareness. If we can be conscious and aware of, that might be what's going on or whatever the case is, it's never about whatever's going on outside of us. We know that it's not about that. It's always about us. Even when we discuss deep levels of empathy and sensitivity, we still can't blame what's going on for it. It's like, oh, they're not pulling us into this. Nobody's doing anything against our will, like maybe, yeah, we are empathetic and sensitive beings, but we're still trying to find a reason to behave a certain way or to feel a certain thing or to, whatever. Maybe we do want to deeply identify, but it's always a choice, right? So it's rarely ever conscious, but it's always a choice. And I do believe we can be in situations where we can see something or hear something. Maybe I see an accident in real life and that's like shocking. And I don't know. It's like if I'm not remaining conscious, like that's me identifying deeply with, oh my God, somebody was just in that car and, or whatever. Maybe I'm seeing something that just takes me out of my body for a minute. Like I'm so deeply identifying with it. If I remain conscious and aware, and just like, you can still feel, empathy for that person or those people in that vehicle and not make it debilitating for yourself, So
very wise. I love what you said about the choice. It's always a choice. It always starts with you.
It does.
You're so wise. I love when you're super wise. You're always wise. That was extra double deluxe wise. Yay. So, okay. So then the other thing about this is that, because, a lot of times judgment is the insecurity thing. Okay. So this, I definitely don't, maybe I could say the insecurity thing would be like, freaky people make me feel unsafe and I want to yell at them. Like when someone behaves like that to somebody else, that makes me feel unsafe, thus insecure with life. And then I yell at it. So I think that interpretation, it's like we're interpreting a painting or something. This interpretation to me,
you did. You painted us a story, so it's pretty good.
I painted you a story. Yeah, it's like, well, I wanted. A lot of times I don't share stuff about myself as much, but I was like, okay, kimono, and
That's awesome.
I really wanted to like look at this from all these angles, and the judge. So basically, when I say insecure, there's two meanings I have. Insecure means life is uncertain and I do not feel safe. That's one interpretation. The other one is I call it ye old girl. You know, I'm gonna say insecurity. I almost said girly, but like I feel like, you know, teenage girl. Does my hair look okay? You know, like where they're just everything about them they're not sure about, right?
Like the world's looking at me girls. And I look terrible.
Yeah, I have to. Yeah, everything's a. Don't worry, ladies, you'll get over it. And but like, you know, I've, you know, obviously been insecure, and men obviously have this too, but we all have insecurities about am I good enough? So that's the other bucket, is the am I good enough? But the insecure of safety, Matt Kahn talks a lot about safety, and I really like that because I think that's like a fundamental thing. Uncertainty and safety are huge problems. Like, here's the memo, people. Nothing is certain, and we're all going to die, so we're not really safe. And so if you can just accept that we don't know, and all you can do is, you know, live, you'll kind of get rid of that level of uncertainty. But I think a lot of people want to plan and make sure, and is everything going to work okay? And does my astrologer say it's all right? And all that stuff. And that's a level of insecurity that I think if you talk to yourself enough, you can get over, because you can trust yourself, and see all of our other podcasts about trusting yourself. But to this point of just general insecurity that drives judgment, I want to hear your thoughts about that. Like the general not good enoughness and judging others.
Yeah. So to me, it all boils down to fear. Anytime I hear like unsafe, I'm like, okay, that's just another way of saying I'm afraid of something. And fear is, to me, fear is like the, if you want to get to the bottom of anything, there's always a fear down there at the very bottom. So don't keep going until you get to that, until you can pinpoint what that fear is. And I know we talked about this in a previous podcast. We just talked about this in previous.
I love that. I love that you're bringing it back. Yeah. Okay. So in the case of, okay, first of all, it's totally brilliant. Now I'm going, okay, what, just to further, dear world, let's analyze me. I think it's just so because it doesn't, amazing. Well, there are a lot of things the audience will not get to see, because I don't want anyone judging me there. But this is enough that I'm like, well, we all do this, so let's unpack it together.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering what the fear was. Like, you hear about a person, like, what was I afraid of? Like, I can say if I'm so empathetic, I leave my body to go be afraid of, she's not going to get to go on her trip, you know, but what, you know, blah, blah, blah. Why am I taking the fear of their lives and putting it in my body? Like, am I addicted to fear? Don't answer that, Erica.
It's a rhetorical question. Thank you.
It was rhetorical. Don't say yes, because it's true. But are we addicted to fear? It was why we do that. Like, we it's almost like watching a movie that's really scary. Is that what happened? Because I feel like that could be true for a lot of times. I've seen other people do this where they just get totally wrapped up in somebody else's deal. Is that it? What do you think? What was, if I was someone you were coaching, what would you say to them?
I would probably ask you, does that resonate with you?
It kind of does. I think it's like a thrill. But it's totally unconscious, except for right now, I'm totally conscious of it.
Yeah, yeah.
Because you were awesome and said the fear thing, and I was like, wait, what was I afraid of? It's so interesting. Audience, first of all, tell us what you think. Okay, keep going. Okay.
I think we've kind of talked about this. The thing that's popping in my head, and the one of the things that you and I have experienced differently is loss. And the reason I say that is because for me, I'm human. I don't think you're human without some kind of fear. and
Right.
fears plural, right? I don't think it's, and maybe it does all boil down to the same kind of fear, because really loss to me is like, that's like universal. None
Yeah.
of us want a broken relationship. None of us want our favorite people to pass on and transition, or
Yeah.
our
We don't want to lose what
pets
we
to
have. We
go.
don't want to lose our
Yeah, we don't
people.
want to lose our financial,
Yeah.
our things. We don't want those things to go. That said, I do think that when we experience these things in a very palpable, deep way, and we kind of, we're like, wow, I'll speak for myself. I feel like I'm not immune to the fear of loss at all. That said, I definitely experienced something, as you know, like so deep at such a tender age. I was conscious enough to know what was going on. At 16, lost my mom, right? I was conscious enough, but I certainly wasn't. I was 16. What 16-year-old is fully conscious and aware? No one.
There's 4 of them. Yeah.
Yeah. But I wasn't like 2 or 3 where I
Yeah.
didn't even realize, right?
Right.
Not to say that that's not traumatic for a 2 or 3-year-old, but my point is, such a great, huge loss happened at such a tender age that I was able to get to a point where my fear is so much less when it comes to that kind of loss. And so I say that because I think, even though I know I still have fears, we all do, I think I kind of feel like I don't worry so much about that kind of thing. I get why people walk around with a lot of fear, and why there are triggers that get us to that point. And so it would be understandable if, you reacted in a way, and maybe, I don't know how we could map back what happened to fear of loss, but maybe that's not it. And I don't even know how I just went off on that little tangent.
Well,
But fear, I guess greatest fear of all, right? Greatest fear of all.
Greatest fear. Yeah. Okay. So maybe we keep thrilling, because to kind of borrow a little bit from you and there's science people, but I'm going to borrow from you because they support what you say, is the emotional habits. So if you're having a totally relaxing day, well, it's just not a good day if you haven't freaked the fuck out. Like in your
Totally.
subconscious, right? So if your subconscious is like, yeah, we have not panicked yet, so that's
Totally.
so maybe there's an emotional habit that the body or the subconscious, who knows where the hell it comes from, but we know that we all do unconscious stuff. It could be an unconscious pattern of like, I need some kind of anger and fear cocktail, right?
Totally.
Fury plus terror equals, yay, I get that chemical rush or something. The body's addicted to it, or, it's an emotional habit, as you've called them in the past. So it's totally unconscious. Like, you don't even see it coming. You're just like, whoop, here's me having that pattern again. Because, because again, it's not I'll call it the judgment of days of old, where I'd be like judging a person. Like, let's say there's perfect woman shows up and you'd be like, yeah, but she does have cellulite. So, like there's the voice, insecure voice kind of thing. This was not in that category in any way, shape, or form. It's a different kind of judgment. It's the like react, judge, put yourself there. And I think it's like a fear injection or something, that people are just addicted to it. And which is why we watch, I mean, I don't anymore, but why you're sort of drawn to these types of TV shows. And to your point, and I'll give you the mic in a sec, you haven't completed your emotional traumas and core wounds. Go see our other podcast about this. So it's coming up for you.
Yes.
Which means I have to go freaking clean my core wounds. Fine. Okay. But I want to know 2 things. Do you concur?
Mm-hmm.
Do you have other thoughts? And how does this have to do with what you're creating in your life?
I 100% concur. You said it beautifully. You laid it out very perfectly. I absolutely think that what happens is we become more and more conscious and aware. And we're like, okay, I'm not going to make choices, or I'm not going to do things to for me, the example would be I have created this windstorm of busy and which creates stress for me. So like stress is like almost a norm for me, which I'm not proud of, but I'm admitting it. So just like, oh my gosh, my, to-do list is 5,000 feet deep. And, and so when I become aware and conscious, I'm like, okay, I'm going to choose no, and I'm going to try to get to a peaceful state. I believe that, whatever you want to call it, my higher self, the universe, whatever you want to call it, is like, okay, really? Here you go. How are you going to not stress about this thing? And so perhaps what happened with you is like, maybe, as you're becoming, because I can see what conversations we've had, I can see you're becoming more and more and more aware, as we all hopefully are. And what's awesome about this is you like quickly you were like, it like happened and you immediately like, it's almost like you were watching yourself do this thing and you're like, what is going on?
Which is which is better than totally huge. Unconscious. Yeah.
Yeah, that's huge. And so perhaps, it's like, okay, maybe it's time to see if we can ruffle her feathers. Here you go. Oh, done.
Check.
Yeah, we ruffled feathers today. All right. But what's cool is, look at the level of awareness and not just level of awareness, but the desire to fix it, the desire to not want to go back there again. And like, oh my God, maybe in the past it would have been like, you would have had the same reaction and then you just would have gone along your day and not even thought twice about it after that,
Nope, wouldn't have thought about it.
Yeah, not anymore. Right.
Yeah,
not anymore.
I love being right. I mean, like,
who doesn't?
Yeah.
Right. So
righteous indignation. Yeah. It's my deal. It's not anymore, but I'm just, people who know me will be like, oh yeah, that's so her. But like, the reason I felt like, and I'm going to throw this ball right back to you. The reason I think I started to pay attention was not only that I don't know, like to grow, but I'm like, this is going to affect your outcomes. Like being this negative, being this afraid, being this judgy is not going to bring you the things that you're looking for. Joy, feeling joy, community, feeling good, calmness, happiness, all these basic things you want of life. Like if you're going to continue to be in these patterns, you don't get to feel that then. Like, and then of course the things that come along with that, because if you're feeling in a good mood, you manifest the flow, hence the flow getter goodness. Like you're creating all this greatness. So that's also a motivation. It's like, if nothing else, like 1, I don't want to be an asshole. 2, I want to feel better. 3, I want to create a better life. Like that's why you aren't judgmental, is not just to, just be good or have people perceive you better. It's like, it's literally affecting every cell, all your vibes,
Totally.
How people, can they stand you anymore? No, you want to be able to like upgrade, right? And you'll create a better life, at least from the inside. It may not affect anything more than how you feel. Well, guess what, people? That's the most important, most impactful thing, because all you've got is how you feel, and then you're dead. So there you go. Okay.
So true.
Yeah.
That was awesome. Absolutely.
Yeah. That's all I got. Okay. So
totally.
All right.
First, can I just say, I probably I'm hoping I speak on behalf of all viewers. Thank you. Because it does, like, I think that when we share personal stories, it helps. It's like, oh my gosh, you're human, you're real. You can be the genius. Yeah. It's scary. You can be. Here's one thing I do want to point out, because we've talked about this in the past. You can be super genius guru type and human and, trip over yourself sometimes, or often.
Absolutely.
That's the thing. I'll real quick, I'll tell the story that you've heard 5,000 times, but viewers have never heard this.
No, bring it.
I remember the first time this idea came to me, or the kind of understanding came to me, because again, extremely judgy. Like I walked through life very, very judgy. So I assumed that if you're you have to walk the talk, if you're not going to, then you're hypocritical and I'm not going to listen to you because you're not worth whatever, which is BS. So I started shortly after I started doing yoga several years ago. I remember taking a class from a woman who, in my view, did not look like she really took care of herself. And even her energy was her energy was a little edgy. She felt stressed to me, and she looked stressed too. I do think that the physical, manifestation happens when you're sending out a certain energy. And I remember walking into her class and I was like, oh, and my immediate thought was, this class is going to suck, which was a pure judgment. Like, I mean, I feel bad even admitting it. It's awful.
But this is what we're doing here. We're helping.
We're helping people, right? Hopefully. So I took the class, and it was hands down one of the best classes I've ever taken. And I was like, I walked out of there like, okay, my bad, first of all. Like, and I actually did. I was like, man, I'm sorry for judging you, in my head, that was so unfair. And then it opened my world up to this idea of, okay, you can be like, you can conduct your life in a certain way personally, and yet have this gift at the same time they seem to be contradictory, perhaps, but it doesn't mean that there's any less truth or realness to either of those things,
Wow.
Like you can be an incredible yoga instructor and know your shit and do a really awesome job, and you're saving lives pretty much, like helping other people learn yoga in such an amazing way, and at the same time be suffering in your own way that's pretty palpable to the outside world as well. And so I'm like, okay. And so that, again, the and world, right? Going back. I mean, we're just going to bring
podcast.
up, we're going to go.
Such a good podcast. Yeah.
Yeah. That's like one of Flow Getter's like messages that we're going to just say in every podcast is this and thing. Cause and helps to eliminate judgment. When you can, when you you're like, I can be and live and believe. I can be a certain way. I can live a certain way. I can believe certain things. I can love certain things, and know that the exact opposite could be someone else's truth. And that is also true, just as equally as true as, right? So it's nice when you remember to and you can hear, you can hear someone's amazing advice and wisdom and see that they may not be living the words that come out of their mouth, and that's okay. It's okay.
Yeah. Well, like you said, people have gifts and they're human. Like, yes. And if I'd say the only person that's close to perfect, there's probably two. Dalai Lama, I don't even know the guy, and Tolle. Okay, no one is close to these people. Right. Yeah. Like, so just let it go and learn from people. If something resonates, you're learning. Yes. End of story, right?
Yeah.
You're learning about yourself. You're learning about who you are, which is the learning. It's not that the people even have the right answers. Something is giving you information about you, expanding into your awesomeness. And that is the whole point of what we're doing here, I think. Mm-hmm. Right?
Absolutely.
So you're a totally genius. Yeah. And you really brought that concept of the and thing in, where it can be both things. And so you don't have to be so judgmental. I'm going to say it again. If you can have and, you get the judgment goes away.
Yes.
Which is huge because your vibration rises. And we all know what good that is. Okay. With our remaining minutes, because you have to go do something stressful. I'm kidding.
You're not. You're totally right.
Quick, go do something. Calm, flow getter. Go,
totally.
go.
We're definitely doing a podcast on stress, though, and overwhelm.
Yes, that's the next. Yeah, stress, anxiety. Oh my God, we got so many good ones lined up. Okay,
totally.
So make sure to like and subscribe, and that'd be great. Okay, but what I did want to say, in the last remaining minutes, so hang in there, audience, is because we've talked about judgments, and we're going to probably title this podcast about judgment. What about the insecurity type of judgment? Because I did want to cover off on that and like how people can really get out of that cycle. I feel like it's been a while since I've been there where I'm judging people about their bodies or their whatever, like I said, in that kind of icky way.
Yeah.
So even though we joke about it, I think I was really there. And then now I feel like I'm not there. how do people get out of this? I mean, when you're in there, you're just in it. And so I don't remember how I got out of it. I think just over time, the consciousness, but I want to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, it's two things. One, okay, self-love. That's where it's at. Because as you, I think that's how you got out of it too.
Yeah, girl.
Because I think
Mm-hmm.
when you commit yourself to appreciating you and admiring you and loving you and focusing on you and putting you first, while at the same time not at the exclusion of other people. Because again, it's an and world and you can do both. And not only can you do both, but believe it or not, when you commit to growing you and making you kind of the center of your world, you automatically are able to, you have more energy, you have more time, you have more for the rest of the world. You're walking around. I kind of, my vision, when you see yourself as love, okay, when you see yourself as love, like an actual thing as love, you're basically, that's all your energy is. So you have no choice but to give that out into the world because you're just doing it automatically. When you don't see yourself as that, you're not giving that freely, even though it's not a thing that you ever have to consciously give. When you realize that that's not how it works, you know.
Mm-hmm.
But you can send off the message of withholding that, and I see that that's again, when you really look at that, that's just fear. You're afraid that if you give it, you're not going to get it back, and then it's like that's not how love works. It's not this thing that's limited. It's limitless. So when you realize that, and we do have podcasts about this, about the idea of just understanding that you are love, that you don't have to give it or receive it. When you know that, it just happens automatically. You're overflowing all the time. It's effortless. Then you get to a point where you're not criticizing yourself. You're not criticizing the outside world, because you just arrive in this love space all the time. And you just see every sort of thing that feels uncomfortable, not as wrong, not as other, not as outside of you. You see it more with compassion and love. You just come from a place of love all the time. And there's nothing wrong ever. And you don't see the world that way anymore. So that's how you get to a place of not judging, because the only reason you're doing that is because you feel like you lack, and you don't.
Okay, mic drop. I would drop this mic, but it's expensive, so I'm not going to. That was incredible answer. Okay. The judgment is stopped by self-love. But I'm glad you said every nuance of that, because that was so impactful and so important. Oh, I just love you.
I love you.
So much excitement. I can't even stand it. Really amazing. Okay. And so with that self-love thing, we're definitely, I know we've talked about it in the past. We have an You Are Love podcast, all this stuff, but we're going to obviously dig more into the self-love thing, because I think that's a huge struggle for everybody. And I think you and I have come a long way. I think we can advise on that. And also there's a little road to go for sure. You're amazing. This
You're
was, do you have
amazing.
any I mean, that was just such a mic drop. I don't know if you could even have any final thoughts. Like, but the universe is always giving, so maybe.
I feel good. Yeah. I
Okay,
feel like
good.
yeah. You're
Well,
amazing. I love
you're
you.
amazing. I love you. And we love our listeners. The handful of you out there, maybe it's millions by now. I don't even know when this podcast is coming out. The people that are listening to this, we really want to say, each and every time we get someone who watched to the end, we're just like, oh, we're with you. And so we want to just say hi, and we love you. And thanks for living life, because it's awesome. So with that, thank you for joining us today. And of course, if you got something on this podcast, you know, I don't even want to ask for likes and subscribes, because I'm like, well, I just assume people will do it. But I realize that if you ask, it kind of happens. So we have to say, can you please
Asking
like
that
it
is
and
given.
subscribe? And yeah, exactly. I'll just go with my advice. Just, it helps the channel. And when it's, it makes us excited to give more content. And of course, we want to hear your comments, find out what you're looking for. see if we can benefit you or talk about topics that you've been wondering about. Obviously, check out our other videos, check out the website at flowgetter.com. Again, we're just so fortunate to have the audience that we do. So, Erica, I am fortunate to exist on this plane, this space-time continuum with you. Thank you for existing. Thanks, everybody. I love you.
We'll see you next time.